ATF to Central, subject headed south, picking up speed. We'll try to stay with him.
Okay, he's been spotted again. This one here.
Okay.
A fugitive terrorist is tracked in New York. We're near the moment of capture, a scenario being played out here in a simulated exercise. This, a first television look inside the new command center of the FBI New York Police Joint Terrorist Task Force.
JTF 2 desk, be advised, subject is in residence.
The FBI agents are up here. NYPD is down here. It's all covered. Once he makes his move, we got him.
Might be accompanied by this female, so they should be alert to the possibility of that. Also, she may be armed.
We have the streets that we want to cut off. Subway stop just up there on the corner.
Transfer's been notified regarding the subway.
Did you check with that school as far as dismissal time? That they're not gonna, kids are not going to come out in the middle of this thing?
Emergency service is in position. Okay.
Yeah.
The helicopter's there. Housing's been notified.
You got heavy weapons? Yes. Okay, good. Okay, Chief, it's a go.
The terrorist threat is unconventional war, demanding an unconventional defense. New approaches such as the creation of this task force, a prototype model for combined investigations instead of competing parallel efforts, which have and still are producing embarrassing episodes for law enforcement across the country. Witness the ongoing hassle now between federal and local authorities over security for the coming Los Angeles Olympics. Rather than fighting for jurisdiction and credit, the Joint Task Force in New York has had considerable success.
A specific problem requires a specific solution. That specific solution for the citizens in New York is a formation of the task force. We have convicted the hierarchy of the Croatian terrorist group. We have rendered Omega-7 practically neutral. What we have done in the terrorism area is in effect create a vacuum.
The biggest FBI investigation in history resulted from the $1.5 million Brinks heist in Rockland County 2 years ago. Chilling connections proving for the first time that radical remnants of the anti-war and civil rights years are now in active collusion with newer terrorist factions. A network involving the Weather Underground, the BLA, Black Liberation Army, RNA, Republic of New Africa, the FALN, Puerto Rican Separatists, and other groups all connected through the May 19th Communist Committee.
We found an association, if not a conspiracy, in a number of illegal acts in connection with bombings and that sort of thing.
There is evidence that there is a supportive structure where perhaps one group can supply false identity or a vehicle or guns to another group.
And the fallout probe goes on with a half a dozen fugitives wanted for murder, conspiracy, and a string of robberies in 7 states. In the group, ringleader Matullah Shakur, also known as Gerald Wayne Williams, also known as Doc.
Shakur operated from here, a one-time acupuncture center on West 139th Street, really an underground headquarters for the terrorist network. According to FBI papers, a communications center for dozens of suspects from various factions. Besides the Brinks job and other robberies, Shakur allegedly planned the 1979 New Jersey prison escape of BLA fugitive Joanne Chesimard, and that same year may very likely have assisted in the New York escape of FALN bomber William Morales. Morales, disfigured in the explosion of a Queens bomb factory 5 years ago, was caught this past May in Mexico and remains in jail there, parroting the line he's a political prisoner. He refused our request over the past month for an interview on the state of the FALN, that and other press refusals reflecting perhaps a new bunker mentality towards the media, tarnishing his revolutionary gloss. When Morales has spoken out, he seems more interested in discussing the state of his health.
I was beaten and electricity was used against me.
I never thought he was as key as everybody gave him credit for. His facility as a bomb maker certainly left an awful lot to be desired, considering that it blew up in his face.
In total, the FALN is believed responsible for 125 bombings over the past 9 years, most of them in New York, including the fatal 1975 explosion at famed Fraunces Tavern. After arrest, there was a lull, but 3 bombings in Lower Manhattan this past New Year's Eve showed the FALN is still very much a threat.
I don't think they're out of business. I think they may be laying low or regrouping, maybe retraining some people, but I think we'll hear from them again.
Already heard from again this month, the group calling itself the United Freedom Front, connected to more than half a dozen bombings in the past year. Among recent targets, those 2 briefcase bombs at a U.S. Navy recruiting office on Long Island. No one was hurt, but the damage was extensive. Recruiting and reserve offices are a visible and vulnerable target. Dozens in New York very exposed. Little can be done to tighten security, particularly as in the recent incidents when the bombers struck during daylight hours.
The bombs were set to go off in the middle of the day. The warning call came in the middle of the day, and principally this group has set their bombs, if you would, to detonate at night, or at least in the late evening. That's significant because the potential for the innocent bystander being hurt is increased greatly when you detonate a bomb in the middle of the day.
The FBI reports U.S. terrorist incidents this year actually declined over 1982, but they've become more violent. Rather than a rising tide of terrorism, we're told there's a rising tide of concern over terrorism. Concerns that kamikaze-style and Iranian-linked truck bombs like the ones that hit in Lebanon and more recently in Kuwait could hit federal targets here. And so the sand trucks, and then concrete barriers guarding the White House and other federal offices in Washington. Barriers erected, too, at the U.S. mission here in New York. Super tight security for presidential trips like the one here in New York this month. And sensitive screening of employees at 26 Federal Plaza, where the FBI is located.
If an individual or a group of individuals is willing to put their life on the line, it's next to impossible to totally defend. But there are a lot of good precautions you can take, such as the barricade, such as screening people entering the building and securing your doors and all of that. But you pay a price when you do that.
This recycling nature of terrorist violence is what makes the mission of the task force here so important.
Okay, they spotted him in the hallway.
Although this is a simulation exercise, the command center is regularly used. They were in here around the clock for 3 days following the New Year's Eve bombings. And new technology is being added all the time to update and broaden the scope of the intelligence and information the center can handle.
Okay, that's a confirmation. Subject is in custody. No injuries.
Got him?
He's in. Okay. Good job.
There's something always happening, whether it's a bombing that's out in the streets and it's very high profile, or whether it's the behind the scenes digging into the records, looking through the files, trying to update information.
Terrorism is unique because they work a lot harder at it. They're more disciplined. Generally, they're better educated type person. They don't leave evidence.
And their security is pretty tight.
It's very tight.
Besides using nearly identical methods for evading surveillance and tightening security, today's terrorists are showing increased ingenuity. This warning poster by the May 19th committee appearing in subways this year using agent pictures from internal FBI papers and undercover photos of task force members actually taken by the terrorists. The bad guys now tracking the good guys.
I think it's interesting that if a terrorist group goes to the trouble of mounting a public relations campaign against you, you're having some effect.
You're getting to them.
I would think so. I mean, we're far from done.
Businesses as well as governments are involved in the building of a defense. Next, we'll look at some of the James Bond hardware of anti-terrorism and further examine the future threat of international terrorism, the New York Connection.